I had the impression, and I was wondering if you had the same impression, that farm subsidy was sort of an iconic case for wobbing in general.
Yeah, I think it was first in a lot of areas. We were first really to do this cross-border collaboration, looking at an EU policy, the biggest EU policy in terms of money, the farm subsidies. And we started in 2005, and immediately it was clear that we needed to work together. And there was a lot of wobbing going on in terms of getting the information out, and then a lot of data analysis going on. And I think we were one of the first to use a website to disseminate the data. And so all those things combined, we're very much setting a model that others have followed. I think a lot of other projects have gone beyond us now, and so I wouldn't want to claim credit for everything, but certainly we were early adopters of a certain combination of freedom of information, data analysis, web and pan-European collaboration.
And why was it so important for farm subsidy to be a cross-border pan-European project? Exactly.
You don't really understand. You can't really understand the Common Agricultural Policy without looking at it in its entirety, and it's a pan-European policy, and what goes on in one country, it's related to what goes on in another country, and when decisions are made about the future of the CAP, they're made here in Brussels and in Luxembourg by European institutions. So if you don't look at it in a European way, then you can't really make sense of where it's come from, what's happening now in terms of policy, and where it's going to go in the future.
Yeah.
And there was also, from a pragmatic point of view, we could replicate a lot of the stories from one country to another, and also as we made progress in getting access to more farm subsidy data in one country, we could use those examples of success to inspire others and basically to put pressure on countries that weren't being open to say, well, look, if we can have transparency in Denmark and Sweden, why can't we have it in France and Spain? So you can use that kind of pressure of saying, look at those people over there, they've got access to this data, why don't we have access to the data in our country?
Yeah, I see. So are events like the Data Harvest Conference very important then for farm subsidy or similar projects?
I mean, one of the things that's really important in terms of looking at this data that we get access to on farm subsidies is local knowledge, and looking at it in a local or national context. And you can't do that sitting in Denmark, sitting in Belgium, sitting in the UK. You can't understand what's going on in Bulgaria and what the data means in the political context if there's corruption revealed by the data or suspicion of corruption. So getting that local knowledge is really important, and so bringing people together from different places to interrogate the data is really important. And also I think it helps that we're all working together and sharing our experiences and sharing problems, and certainly on the tech side, a lot of the data extraction, the screen scraping that's done by the programmers, they often like working together because they can help each other solve problems. And once a year for a project team to meet up together physically, is good for a project.
Is it an ongoing project? I suppose so. Where do you see the future heading toward?
Well, there's a big question mark over the future of transparency in European finance or European financed policies because of this court ruling about protection of privacy, and therefore the names of individual recipients of EU funds can't be published if those are people rather than companies. We disagree fundamentally with the ruling of the Court of Justice. We think that there are good ways around it that the European Commission can adopt, but we're not quite clear whether that's going to happen. So this year, the big story from our data harvest here in Brussels is that there's much less data being published than in the past. In fact, we think that about 90% of the beneficiaries have been concealed and redacted from the data. So we're only working with 10% of the beneficiaries. That's a little bit more than 10% of the money, because often the companies are receiving more money than the individuals. But basically, we've had a crisis in transparency, and depending on how that works out in the future, that's going to decide whether we're going to have a project to work with in the future, because if we get less and less data, then there's less and less stories.
Yeah.